and good evening. I'm Lisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Today we're discussing the unfortunately perennial issue of inequality or inequity in education, especially among Indian children from the B40 community. Recently, Klang MP Charles Santiago highlighted the issue of straight A students from Indian ethnicity who were denied entrance into the pre-university matriculation system. He called this, quote, an apartheid-esque system in education, claiming it keeps bright Indian students from the B40 community entrapped in a cycle of poverty. Charles Santiago joins us now. Charles, thank you for being on the show tonight. Can you elaborate on this situation? How did you come to learn about this injustice?
Hi, Melissa, and thanks for this kind invite. To answer your question, once the results were announced in terms of admissions was announced for the matriculation program, I received quite a number of phone calls, both from Klang as well as other places in the country, basically quite upset that their children were not given a chance to join the matriculation program. And when I looked at the results that they had, which were sent to me, some of the students had 8 A's, 9 A's, 10 A's, and there was one case of 11 A's, straight 11 A's, but was rejected from the program. Then I actually wrote a letter to the Minister of Education asking him to clarify why these children were actually rejected. Of course, in usual from him, there was no reply. And then I sent him another letter, a reminder letter, say, please help to explain to lots of parents who are quite upset why the children did not get a chance to join the program. Also, no response. At the same time, I also tweeted him. I also posted things on the Facebook to get his attention. No reply at all. But I think, this actually goes to show the problem that we have in the system of education that we have. And education, provides a response to many issues. One on the kind of manpower needs of the country. That's number one. And then number two, it also helps to close the gap between the rich and the poor, between communities as well as within the community as well. So education has a multi-focused role, if you want. And Malaysia needs all of that, though. At this time, we complain that some of our good students, some of our smart guys are leaving the country, going overseas. And some have put the number as about at least 1.5 million professional Malaysians have left the country to go and join other countries as part of their labor force as opposed to Malaysia. So essentially there is a need for good students to be trained and to work in Malaysia. But this is not happening. And a lot of students who actually were denied, who got 10 A's, 11 A's, and so on, or even 8 A's, who were denied and who reached out to me were basically people from the working class, Indians, if you want. And these are your children of drivers, children of ordinary workers, and so on and so forth. So I don't see why the government cannot absorb them in the matriculation system.
Right. Well, this matriculation system, this fast track into university, a pre-university training, defenders of the matriculation system say this 90 to 10 quota, it's really just a way to enter, an easier way to enter university, but there are other ways to enter university as well, public university, STPM being an option. They use that as a rationale for those who are turned away from the matriculation system, saying that there's other avenues to enter public university. How would you respond to that as a justification?
Well, this is not really an answer to the problem that we are having. It's just a justification that has got no sense. The quick question is, the government talks about a Keluarga Malaysia. If there's a Keluarga Malaysia, then the opportunity should be accorded to everybody else. Everybody should be given the same level of privilege or support. But in this case, 90% goes towards the Putra community and 10% to Indians and Chinese. Now, this is really unfair, 90 and 10. It does not even represents the community as such. The breakdown, the composition of the various races in the country, and also, it again tells you where the government is on this issue. In terms of labor requirement for the country, human resources requirement for the country, as well as closing the gap with the rich and the poor. So I think this is where the government has to have a bigger heart, and also a different strategic goal in actually embracing students who actually have got 8, 9, and 10 A's, 11 A's. So these are the cream students that you have rejected. And clearly, some of them do not want to go to the STPM, and some of them might want to go to the private sector. But when I speak to these people, clearly they cannot go into the private sector because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Very expensive. And of course, the other route is to STPM. But these are the routes that are made available for everybody. So why say, okay, you rejected from matriculation, it's fine, so you can use the other routes. I mean, the route should be then available to everybody as well. It should be, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So therefore, you should be able to take advantage of the students who have got 11 A's, 10 A's, and 9 A's. And these are your cream students. And if they are cream students, it is they you want to help to develop and nurture, while also looking at other students who have not done very well, or who have failed in their exams and so on. So I think this is something that really has to be thought through, though. I'm looking at two issues. The one is the labor resources requirement for the country, as well as for closing the gap, the wealth gap, the income gap with the rich and the poor. So another strategy that needs to be thought through while we're raising about both of these issues in terms of dropout, as well as closing the gap with the rich and the poor, as well as human resources requirements in the future, is to rethink TVET. TVET right now is only given to you after Form 5, after 15 years of education. You can decide to go the TVET way. But I think, given that the volume of dropout among the Indians is very, very high, very, very high. So, for example, last year, the number of students who did not take the SPM exam was 25,000. This is reported by the ministry itself. So 25,000 students did not feel comfortable in taking the SPM exam. Now, some people say that 25,000 is not correct. The number is far, far, far higher. Some even put it at 100,000, but the government says it's 25,000. Even if you take that as the correct number, what is going to happen to them? My suggestion would be to start looking at TVET after they have done 6 years of education.
Charles, is that 25,000 Indian students who
No,
did not
in general.
In general, okay.
In general.
Right.
So we need to rethink TVET, and then we should say, okay, maybe we should introduce TVET at a much earlier stage to stop the dropout, because the dropout rate is very high among Indians, both in Sekolah Kebangsaan as well as in Sekolah in the Tamil schools itself. And I'm sure it's the same also for Malay students in the various Malay schools, as well as in Sekolah Kebangsaan. So maybe as a way to stop this dropout among the poor, this is poor people who are dropping out, they should now be given another route.
Charles, you bring up a really good point about the dropout rates, particularly within the Indian community, the B40 Indian community. I'm going to be touching on that in the next segment of the show. But I want to come back to the issue of inequity in education, racial discrimination, all of that perennial issues, but it seems to be getting a bit more traction nowadays. People are talking about it openly. I think there was recently a video by some rappers, Indian rappers in a music video, all giving voice to the discrimination that are faced by dark-skinned minorities. I want to ask you if you foresee this becoming more of a young electoral issue that will be discussed as we enter into the next general elections.
Well, I think the lack of opportunities, not only in the issue of education, but also in terms of government procurement, small businesses, and so on, among the young Indians, have become an issue for so many years, as you correctly point out. But increasingly, I can see a lot of them wanting to use that as an election issue, as a way to negotiate with the government, whichever government comes to power, as a basis to vote for them. So that the rapper that you talked about, that I think it was brilliantly done, though. It was very well done, very well done. And when I was listening to it and looking at the images and so on, I was thinking, oh, that's a great plot for the next elections, though. And this is something that policymakers and also political parties have to look at and say, hey, look at how different communities are voicing their grievances, though, are voicing their problems and their aspirations as well. I think that's quite clear what they were sharing with us, though, the plight of the Indian community, and that nobody looks at them seriously anymore, and that is because the Indian community does not sway votes in any one particular way in any constituency. They're about 10%, 15%, 20% in a variety of constituencies, but don't really influence. So basically, the message that came out of that thing is that Indians, if they unite together, can become kingmakers.
All right,
So
Charles, thank
that's
you so
what
much.
they're
Yeah.
looking
Charles, thank you so much for speaking with me. Klang MP Charles Santiago there. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about the unfortunately perennial issue of inequality or inequity in education, especially among Indian children within the B40 community. As Klang MP Charles Santiago pointed out a little earlier in the show, the school dropout rate for Indian students is worryingly high, especially as many of them who drop out are from B40 households for whom education can be an avenue for upward social mobility. Joining us now to discuss this issue further, I have Datuk Pardip Kumar Kukreja. He is the founder of the NGO Tara Foundation. Datuk Pardip, thank you for being on the show with me today. Tara Foundation has initiated a project called Mission 2030 Zero Dropouts, which is a 10-year commitment to stop the excessive dropout rates from the Malaysian Indian B40 community. I'd like us to maybe begin this conversation by better understanding the seriousness of this issue. How high are these dropout rates, and what are the factors that lead the children to drop out from school?
Okay, so Melissa, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here. This topic, to some extent, many term it as sensitive, and people avoid speaking about this openly, but I think a time has come for us to discuss it openly and discuss it in a very balanced and fair manner to everyone. Okay, so first and foremost, allow me to say that most of the time people use the word Indian children drop out. Okay, they generalize the word Indian by and large. Okay, so I must qualify this first to say that for us to get this thing right, we must say the B40 Indian community. So generally, by and large, from our little rudimentary survey that we do all the time, the middle class, upper middle class Indian families are okay. They seem to be managing, they work very hard, and they seem to get their children through to education. But there is a huge problem in the B40 community. So that's something we have to focus on. So let me just give you a quick background about the B40 community. We have been working on this and trying to understand the background for about the last 3.5 years. And every Sunday, me and a few of us, we used to go to one of the B40 areas. You know, in the West, they call it ghettos or things like that. But we used to go to B40 areas to try and understand the problem. And you know what? When we speak to the kids, what do you want to become when you grow up? 90% would tell us lorry driver, bus driver, taxi driver, and things like that. Now, why they say that is because their parents are in that profession. Okay, parents are bus drivers, taxi drivers, lorry drivers, etc., etc., and that's what they also aspire to become. And when we look back one step further, their grandparents were also laborers. So, in a way, it gave us a very clear indication that these kids are trapped in a certain environment, and for them to come out of this poverty cycle is not easy. In fact,
Right.
for them to meet someone like me, so-called, dato so-called, whatever it means, it was something very unique for them. They've never met somebody like me coming there in a good car and things like that. So that was a very interesting
Right.
revelation we had. So now, the reasons that we discovered for which I think these things keep happening repeatedly is, one is the parents lack educational grounding. The parents don't have an education foundation, therefore they don't understand how to get their kids into proper education. That's number one. Number two, they come from very tough family backgrounds. Uh, the father or the mother, or very, very often, they are single parents. The mother is alone, the father is alone, and things like that. And quite often, the kids are even with their grandparents, and the parents are separated, you know. So they come from a very tough background with very little guidance. So that's something we hope that we can also provide, amongst other things, to the kids as we go
Okay.
along this journey. And
Right.
the third thing that we discovered in our study was the social environment there is extremely, extremely challenging. When the kids come home, let's say at 2 o'clock or whatever time from school, the father is not home and possibly the mother is not home. They are alone in the house and you are surrounded by a few hundred other kids. What do you do?
Mm.
And they all have mobile phones. Hey, come, let's meet downstairs. And they start meeting, and then they start talking, and they start picking up a cigarette and liquor and alcohol and gangsterism as well.
Right. Pardeep, I do want to ask you though. I mean, yes, these are important issues to address within the family structure, within societal support. But if we take a look at the education system, what is causing children who are already in the education system to drop out of that pipeline, to not continue on into secondary school or past secondary school after SPM, looking into tertiary education, which is hopefully an avenue to get them to break this intergenerational poverty cycle that you alluded to earlier?
Great. Actually, you have pinned the whole thing down into one of the most important aspects that we need to address. So when I said the environment is tough, the parents don't have proper parental support and things like that, what I was effectively getting at is that when they go to school, be it standard one onwards, actually, I would say from standard one onwards, they have very, very poor educational grounding. They do not and they cannot keep up with the school because of the environment they live in. So the only little support they get is at the school, and when they come home, it's zero support. So they do not indulge in studies at home, they do not do their homework properly, and things like that. Therefore, their basic primary education, starting from primary one, is extremely weak.
Mm.
And we suspect that every year about 5% of the kids will drop out. you know yeah, we suspect 5% of the B40 Indian kids.
That's still too high a figure that we need to address. Can I ask you then, what is needed? What kind of specific assistance might be provided to these students to keep them within the school system?
Yeah. So the most important thing here is that we got to catch them young, right? We know of many NGOs who are doing such work, but they start in standard 6, they start in form 3, they start in form 5, trying to get the kids into higher education. But we little realize that probably, and we stand corrected on this number, probably 90% of the B40 kids would have dropped out by the time this batch reaches form 5. So
Wow.
only 10%. In fact, here's a little chart you may want to quickly peek into. Only 10% of the kids actually make it to tertiary and higher education. 90% get back into the cycle of poverty. And that's because we all seem to be obsessed with higher education. It's time for us to pay attention to the importance of lower education. That's my punchline for today.
What do you mean by lower education? You're talking about secondary, primary and secondary. Okay,
Primary,
right.
start in standard 1. Start giving them support in standard 1.
And what kind of support is needed to achieve this educational grounding that
Yes,
you said?
yes. So they go to decent school, the government schools. I think, in all fairness, are well run, well set up, well funded by the government, etc. But they need after school support. You know, that after school support for this category of children is extremely, extremely important. So, strictly speaking, you know, it would be perfect if the government provided it after school support, right? Knowing, okay, these kids are from B40, these kids are weak in their studies, let's give them the extra support. But because that's not happening, that's where NGOs like ours have to jump in and provide this after school support. So we take in the kids right from 2 o'clock. As soon as they come back from school, we take them in.
Is there a way that for NGOs to work with government agencies to provide, again, government may not know exactly the issues on the ground. NGOs are very good at that because you have access to these households. Is there possibility of working together with government so that NGOs are that bridge, NGOs help close that gap?
Absolutely. In fact, I think that is probably the only way to go forward, because NGOs want to help and government has the financial resources. If we put these two together, we can't go wrong. So there's got to be a concerted initiative to make this a priority area, and government and the NGOs work together to make this happen. I must say at this juncture that Mitra, an agency that was set up some time ago, has got into this to some extent, but I think a lot more needs to be done. And I think if the whole machinery can be focused towards providing support at early education stage, we will see a huge difference in the next generation, which is 10 years from now, not very far away. From standard 1, we go in at age 7, form 5, we come out at age 17. It's just 10 years. And time just flies by like that. So we have to start there.
All right, Dato' Pardip, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I appreciate your time and all the best with Mission 2030, zero dropouts. That was my conversation with Dato' Pardip Kumar Kukreja from Tara Foundation. And that wraps up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.